Speaking of setup, we're here.
How sweet is that?
We're now doing the Forrest Gump bench routine.
I remember that. How cool is the office though?
Yeah, we've been we're gradually setting things up here. So it's like getting some different lights, trying to get the camera angles to work in the space.
I work the other side as my office. Oh, I dig being here.
Yeah.
So everything you see is wood. So when I put the music on, it's a party.
Sounds tremendous. Yeah.
With the HomePod, it's like I'm digging the office.
I will say this: I'm gonna shit on Apple Music because Apple Music sucks. You use it as your music streaming thing. I hate it.
You know what I use now is YouTube video.
Do you?
YouTube Music.
But Apple Music does work so good with the HomePods.
Yeah.
And the fucking HomePods, other than like the Sonos ones, are pretty good.
Yeah.
But I have
I like this one better.
I got one of the big like JBL like Bluetooth speakers. It bangs pretty hard. I liked it. And then you left one of the HomePods at the other apartment, so I was like, "Oh, let me try this one." And I was like, "Fuck, it's better."
Yeah.
Fuck. But then,
Apple
but then there's one more little hiccup in using Spotify with the HomePod. It's not as perfect as going
as
right to
Apple Music. Well, I mean, you can't blame them for that. By the way, is that camera on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
just fucking with you, but yeah.
I cannot give in to that temptation now because I just pushed it and I said it's recording and then I sat down. So
but the YouTube Music works well with the HomePod, and it's choosing. Okay, this is Big Brother, I guess, but it's choosing the same music almost as Apple.
Yeah, it should be.
Little bit difference, but not that big. Yeah, but how does it know?
Nowadays, it's I get you. Yeah. Nowadays, it's interesting because like Spotify and it's like there's only a few holdouts that aren't on one that's on the other anymore. Right. So then it really just depends on like what.
I've had music popping out of Apple Music that I like Beowulf.
Yeah.
He does like a lot of cool, like, movie into the music kind of stuff. And I had two of them popping out of Apple Music lately.
Like removed from
it?
Oh, no shit.
That I really liked. So I was like, oh. Yeah, so there's still a war going on within the music industry we are not aware of.
Here's the thing. You can choose Spotify, you can choose Apple Music. There's one thing nobody will ever give a fuck about, and it's Tidal. Whatever that Jay-Z thing is trying to hang on to.
Yeah.
But
no, that's not working.
No. So we're in the studio. Julian's been messaging me it's been probably 3-4 days straight on this subject here.
Yeah. Right. So we said we are going to do interoception, which is coming.
We'll get there.
Which is coming, but we have to go about that one first. The reason I want to go about that one first is I think it will set up all my conversations, all the podcast about interoception. I believe that what I'm going to talk about is, from a practical perspective, one of the most important things I've been delving into, because it's highly practical. The interoception is required to understand the why this will work and stuff like that, but from a practical standpoint, this is something that I can apply right now into understanding how to train someone, what does it mean, life, anxiety, depression, and the relationship within all this.
Let's dive right in.
Let's do this.
Because even when you were sending me I was getting studies.
Get the other ones. Get the book ones. You'll have better stuff.
When I was going through
Did I give it to you? Oh, it's right there. Yeah. Yeah. So you guys have to understand that Tyler has had no rehearsal on this. So I'm going to throw the shit at him. He has no clue what's coming. It's always my favorite
now in this
way
case,
to do things.
I did read the materials you sent me. The problem is they're almost unreadable. And without... Sorry, guys. Bear with me here.
Well, this one is not one... the problem is this isn't one study. This is 3 of them.
Well, and that was the issue. And so, and in what I was reading, even the takeaway they got from one of the studies was kind of weird. It didn't make sense.
Right.
And then,
so I gave you my notes on the
So I
studies.
had to ask you. I said, you need to tell me what this is about.
By the way, so you guys know, this is my notebook. This is where all the secrets are. So there you go.
This is the...
I put the thing
Holy
exactly
Grail.
on the page.
It is. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
There you go. Right.
Okay.
So that's the PC1 and PC2, right? So you start here.
And 1. Okay.
There you go. So that I'm gonna hang Tyler to dry, but I just won't be too mean about it.
I've got some notes, and there's going to be some abbreviations here that are going to come through too that we'll have to that'll make it cloudy.
Yeah, because it's
I'm so tired of reading this.
Right. Right.
So can you give me? Let's at least give an overview of what, say, the systems that these are talking about.
Right. So there's this is a work that has been done. So serotonin has been studied. This, in a way, is about serotonin. In a very roundabout way, it's about serotonin. This has been studied extensively for, 40, 50 years now because of the antidepressants and all that stuff. And so as they studied that, they realized that, so let me explain how serotonin is produced, because that's what this observation is about, right? So you have a genetic system in order to produce serotonin. Serotonin is produced in a part of the brain that is called the RAF nuclei, right? That part of the brain also controls circadian rhythms.
Yes.
So that will come that will be very important later. This is where brain serotonin is produced. So two types of serotonin: the body serotonin, the brain serotonin. The serotonin cannot go past the blood-brain barrier, right? So that means whatever serotonin happens in the brain is produced in the brain, in the RAF nuclei, which is also the center for circadian rhythms, right? That's the base, right?
So brain serotonin is going to be definitely anchored to that.
And into the part of the brain that controls circadian rhythms. All that stuff is extremely important because then we'll go into sleep and all that stuff, right? Okay. The entire system to do that is, there's a gene responsible for the production of serotonin. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, right? So the whole genetic stuff, the markers come of something that is called the 5-HTTP, right? Which is the genetic sequencing of serotonin, right? And there's something called the 5-HTT-LPR, right? Which is anchored on the 17th chromosomes, which basically will decide roughly how much serotonin you're gonna produce, right? So it's divided into what is called an allele, which is, if you guys remember your biology classes, allele, genetic chromosomes, anyway. So there's something called the S is for short, and the L is for long, right? So it has to do with all the stuff. Just, if you're interested in that, Google it.
So when we're going into this, it's 5-HTTP with an L, and then there's one with an
technically
S.
it's 5-HTT-LPR. How about I say 5HL and 5HS?
Perfect.
So we make it right.
Yeah.
So the S, there's SS, LS, LL.
Okay.
The S is dominant. So the LS will be considered an S, even though an SS is even more. But we're going. As usual, we have to start with functional segregation so I can explain.
Yeah.
The only thing that matters about this conversation is functional integration. Is how does it work within the body? Otherwise, we're going to make the same mistakes a lot of them are making, and that's where the conclusions are wrong.
So you're going to explain this in isolation, then we're going to drag
Then we're going to put it together. Okay. So I'm going to explain to you what all this is, what the studies are saying, where their conclusions I believe is wrong, why they're fucking up the conclusions, what I think the right conclusions to get is, and what can we do with that, which is really truly the important part. So let's start with that. So the LLs, so the S and the L, actually, very interestingly, culturally speaking, seems to have an effect. For example, in the Western world, the SS allele is very low. I think it's under 20%. While in Japan, it's over 60%. So the numbers are almost swapped between the SS allele and the LL, the two edges, right? In Western world and in Japan, for example. Interestingly, Japan has a high rate of suicide, but they have a rate of anxiety that is 10% less than in the Western world. Mood disorder is 4 times less in Japan. 10 times less for anxiety. Is that because of the testing? So? Welcome to the world of all that stuff where honestly we don't know well.
I find everything that I find trying to find any correlation between anxiety, health, culture, anxiety and medication, suicide risk and medication, suicide risk and anxiety or depression. All those numbers are a fucking nightmare to wade through because it's like, well, was the medication you were on the reason you committed suicide?
Right, exactly.
So it just becomes this mess of things. So we just got to detach. But
this is also part of what I want to talk about, is how much we don't know. This is the biggest takeaway that I want people to have. Maybe not biggest takeaway, because it's not, but a big takeaway to have also from all the stuff we talk about is the fact that we don't know. Especially when it comes to serotonin and everything. Like, there is that speech out there that serotonin is a molecule of happiness. We know what it does. You raise the serotonin, done. Everything is great. I'm like, Fuck no. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It's a messenger. That's all it, like fucking with a messenger does not change the news.
No.
I mean, this is King Midas. Yeah. Remember King Midas that touched everything turned to gold? Right. The reason he was cursed is before that, he was famous for, at least in the legend, obviously, to kill all messengers that would bring him bad news. He worked. There was no more bad news in his kingdom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this is what we're doing with all that shit. So this is what worries me, is those conversations where functional segregation is in play. We take one thing, and then we extrapolate on that and make a generalization we cannot make. And we're fucking up the functional integration of that information completely. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So now we have the allele, the S allele, and then the L allele. And then from there, they started kind of mapping personalities and stuff like that. And they saw things that were very interesting. So the basic stuff that they see, right? And I'll explain where again the conclusion fucked up. So the basic stuff that they see is what? It's like if you take the S allele, right? They have a baseline that is higher on the sympathetic tone.
Okay.
Right. So how did they do their study? They put people at the baseline and then they introduce pain. Two types of pain. There's a pain that is on the conscious, when you actually start to realize, and below that. So they've tested all that. You'll like this one. One of the best tests to do is to put something in the ass and then to blow it up. I kid you not.
Sounds about right.
This is most of the
studies.
I think
I've seen that
video. Look, scientists have the right to have fun as well, right? But they did that because why? Because it's visceral. One of the major pain axis is the gut to brain axis. It's a major one. And so that's why they use it, because then they get reactions right away, right? So enteric to stuff. And so what they have is they have a balloon that they expand. Below a certain capacity, the pain will start, but you won't notice it. And eventually, you'll notice it.
And by not notice, you mean the signal is going.
It's going.
But if the person is asked,
they say they won't feel anything. Yeah. That's not true. They're already feeling it, but not on a conscious level. Exactly. The neocortex is not being told yet, right? And then eventually it does, and then they're going to see which amount of pain they can take based on that. So there's a few...
Don't sign up for that study.
No, but even if you study, like, did you ask the right questions about how much pain you can take? You know what I mean? Anyway, right. So
traditionally I can only take about 11 inches of pain.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's a little bit what I want to know, honestly. But anyway, but there's also the one where they're going to tap directly on your finger and stuff like that. What you have to understand about this study is this is passive pain. This is, because the study I'm going to talk about, the first one is how much pain can you tolerate in a passive way.
Yeah.
Why? Do you think that matters? Fuck yeah, it does. Yeah. Right. So there's already a limitation of that study. This is pain in a passive way.
Yeah, it really is like pain in a vacuum.
Well, in the passive vacuum on top of it, right? So that's going to matter a lot. So they're going to establish two baseline. Baseline, no pain, is no pain. And then what happens when you're in pain? What they noticed is that the S allele, right, is in baseline as a higher sympathetic tone, a lower parasympathetic tone. So HRV, stuff like, right. When pain starts, they are going to switch toward a higher parasympathetic tone and lower their sympathetic tone. Okay. Right, so that's very interesting, right? That's their reaction to pain. They're going, so parasympathetic tone can also mean freeze. So they call that the tonic freeze. When they go, whoop, what's happening? You start to pay attention, but you're not taking action yet. You're just starting to pay attention. Be like a fighter who got punched and you go, ooh, what happened? Yeah, that's what they call. Well, yeah, but there's a hang on, I'm freaking out, and there's a hang on going like, let's not do that again. Yeah. That's called a tonic freeze, which I thought was a very interesting. Was that your phone?
Couldn't have been. Could it have been?
It's not mine.
We'll move on.
Okay, whatever.
There's no way.
Or maybe it's the TV because of the setup. Anyway, right. So you have. Oh, that's gonna happen. Wait, 1 second, guys. Yeah. Huh. Is that you?
I've never ever had the sound turned on. I must have fat-handed it.
There you go. We're good, Tyler, fucking things up again. Jeez. There you go.
This is my first
professionalism.
My first podcast.
Exactly, professionalism, Tyler. Professionalism. So the S allele.
We're talking about balloons in people's asses for the last 10 minutes.
And actually hitting their finger with the thing, right? And so the S allele has a reaction, which is, so the baseline, so everyday life is more sympathetic, right? And when they go to pain, they start to switch more toward the parasympathetic tone. Everything being obviously a percentage, right? It's not full sympathetic, but
the ratio starts to change.
Right, but that tells you that when the stress starts, they go toward more a parasympathetic reaction, right? So obviously it's going to be sympathetic, but they want to go toward parasympathetic. So that tells you that when the stress gets too high, they go to freeze.
Okay.
Right. So that's going to have implication because of movement, IT, and all that stuff after. The person with the L allele is the opposite. They have a greater parasympathetic tone in baseline, but the second they go to pain, they switch to sympathetic. So they have a fight and flight reaction to pain. Whereas the person with the S allele is trying to diminish the reaction. What's interesting is the person with the S allele, it's been proved that during pain, they have a deactivation of the emotional networks associated with what's happening. They detach emotionally from the pain and just trying to understand what happens. Right. So, based on those conclusions, so what did they see? Because there's a bunch of stuff we saw as well. Like, for example, what does that mean, all this? That means that the people with... That one is mine.
We're just going to be okay.
Yeah. The people with it's my first podcast as well. The people with the SRL, for example, will be have a high cortisol level during the day than people with SRL because they're more in a sympathetic state all day.
Yeah.
Right? So they have a higher sympathetic state all day. Cortisol is higher. That's normal. But also because of... basically what they have in SRL is they have less serotonin.
Okay.
Right. Roughly. Right? They have less serotonin. Because the serotonin is being produced in the RAF nucleus, so that means there's less activation of that, right? You can see that has an impact on the circadian rhythms. People with the S allele don't sleep as well. They have worse sleep. People with the L allele basically have more serotonin. So they sleep better. They probably have a better activation in the RAF nuclei. At least as a baseline, they sleep better. So what does that mean? You can start to see psychological... So we started to work on the psychological effects on that. And what did you see? You see people with the S allele have a greater aversion to loss and risks because they think long term, right? They're more reactive to stuff. They go long term.
And that's the group that also gets better sleep.
No, that's the worst sleep.
That's the worst.
That's the worst sleep.
Okay.
So worse sleep, greater risk aversion, greatest loss aversion, but also long-term planning. They're better at planning long-term. I'm being nice to Tyler. Okay.
Which one here?
S allele.
This list. Okay.
This S allele. So that's basically the people with the worst sleep, right?
Okay.
They're better at long-term stuff, long-term goals, right? They do better at all that kind of stuff. Worse sleep, all this, right? The people with the L allele, right, will be more willing, have a lower aversion to loss and risk, so they'll take greater risk, but they're also more short-term people. They are proactive, but that means they need constant short-term goals.
Gotcha.
Right, so that we are playing with that. It was funny because we were talking about that with Richard. We haven't done the testing yet, but from all the stuff that I read, my guess is Richard is on the LL, I'm on the SS stuff. So he's what? He's a very... by the way, the people with the LLL have been shown to dwell longer toward positive images. People with the SLL will go toward negative images faster, will detach from positive images faster. Right, so we're looking at things, and that would mean like what? Like someone like Richard has to have like challenges, short-term goals all the time. Where me, I do better if it's a year from now. So how did I fuck up, for example, with Jiu-Jitsu and strongman? It was only thing that matters is the competition in 2 months. I let go of long-term goal, which is becoming stronger, right, as a constraint. And I focused on objectives, which is very short-term goals. That kills me. He would be better focusing a little bit, never focusing on objective, but having shorter time goals than longer.
Making sure that there is at least something to...
Right. So they have to be more objective along the way with the constraints, where I'll do better into pure constraints. So that's the LLL, right? You can see all the stuff that they have. So there was an entire mapping on things like that. What mattered to me a lot was the sympathetic tone, higher sympathetic tone for the SLL during the day at baseline, higher parasympathetic tone for the, higher parasympathetic tone for the L allele, higher sympathetic tone for the S allele. Right. Based on that, what their conclusions were, that the S allele is a grouchy gene, because that's the one that makes you more likely to fall into depression or to be pissed all day. Mm-hmm. That was their conclusion. So that means that people with the S allele will be more anxious, more geared toward depression. I'm like, right, you could say it like that. But first of all, first problem, people with S alleles have worse sleep. So in your questionnaire, in your study toward people with S allele and anxiety, did you take that fact into consideration?
No.
The answer is no, because I read the studies, they did not. So I'm like, but we know how much fucking up with the circadian rhythm affects anxiety and depression. So
you could just say simply that if it affects the sleep, that it could just be the sleep that creates the issue too.
Right, and so, but you are more likely to have worse sleep as an SRL. Mm-hmm. So right, so again, I'm going to come to a list because it's very important, because it's the way we look at things that I believe resulted in the wrong conclusion. So people with SRL have worse sleep. People with LRL technically have better sleep. So because with people with a SRL go toward a parasympathetic, a higher parasympathetic tone under stress, where is depression, for example? Remember, dorsal vagus nerve and all that stuff is toward freeze. So that means that in a situation of great stress, you are more likely to fall toward depression, or you'll fall toward depression faster. Right, while people with LRL, they have a sympathetic reaction, which means they're more likely to go toward flight when the stress becomes too great. So they'll spend longer time in flight, but constantly fighting, which obviously eventually will tank them. But it seems that the SRL will go toward depression faster in that sense. No. So that's why this is a greater risk for depression in the SRL. Yes, in that sense, but again, like everything has a function.
So you're saying taking just this genetic point,
right,
and saying this means you are this is very much short-sighted, that the genetic point really moves too many things around for that to be its own thing.
And by the way, it has a function.
Right. What is the function?
Exactly. What is the function? That's always the question. This is where functional integration comes in. I remember the free energy principle, Carl Friston, is that the body is always trying to learn, is making a prediction or whatever. So that means that genetically speaking, we can trust evolution to have a point. Right, so what is the SRL as a function? So this is what I think. When I see SRL, yeah, actually that works, SRL. What I see is the mushin remember, like the Japanese culture and that is the mushin, is people that need to constantly do shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like constantly in a sympathetic state, on a higher sympathetic state, so you constantly, yes, it can be anxiety, but anxiety is not always bad. But what is a good anxiety? Call to action.
Yeah.
Bad anxiety is avoidance, right? Mm-hmm. Which eventually you get to. But what if the SRL basically is something that puts you in a constant call for action? And so, by the way, the point is to get to the top of the arch, right? That's what the body truly wants. So in order to get to a parasympathetic state, so like something, you need to start to introduce stress. Mm-hmm. So that means that the SRL, in a way, in order for you to be as efficient, to be as good as you can, would push you toward pain, toward doing more. Mm-hmm. So they say people with the LRL are more extroverted, they're more content and everything. Yeah, okay, good, great. And then they don't have to do as much now, do they? Why would you? Because they're not being pushed.
Yeah.
Very interestingly speaking, the SRL has been proven that it's far more common in cultures that are toward the collective versus the individual. So Japan, which is very much a collective, you know what I mean? Collective culture in that sense, has much higher S. So means you have to do work for, you know what I mean? Contribute. So there's an entire thing, yes, a contribution based. So, but even if you take that back to that talk I was talking about, autism as an evolutionary trait and everything, what would you see? You need, in order to dominate our own kind, it's how much work can you do? How do you succeed in life today? Is how much work can you put into your passion?
Yeah.
Right. So, by the way, but then you go back to the disengagement of the emotional network on pain and everything. That means it will allow you not to get too pummeled on your sense of self and just keep on moving. Mm-hmm. Sounds like very much like the Japanese culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And not a lot of room. I mean, that describes just like you mentioned in the podcast a couple weeks ago about how you're cutting something so particular, so focused that at that moment you don't even exist. It's just the task.
Right. So the executive network.
Yeah.
So is it possible, like there's no study on this, but is it possible to link the S allele toward the executive, toward salient and executive network, right? Yeah. Whereas the default network, all the stuff is more, a lot of it is toward the parasympathetic side. So that means you would have people that are more on the parasympathetic side all the time. That's the L allele, right? Mm-hmm. All the words there, but they're more content and stuff like that. By the way, those are all men. I'm going to talk about this. That's the men's side with more serotonin, more content. They're there. Whereas the other ones, why do they have maybe less serotonin? Maybe because it's required for them to go get more.
Yeah. They're just a little behind on the game. It's kind of the way I was looking.
Or evolution gave them a motivation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's what's happening now. That's the problem is we think, they have less serotonin. No, they have less of a serotonin baseline. Mm-hmm. Right. But that doesn't mean that once they start moving, the things are not equal. You know what I mean there? Yeah. So I think the point is that at a baseline, there's a lower serotonin because you're not supposed to be at a baseline. Everything that stuff screams to me is those are people that have to be, we're in constant pain.
Yeah, that baseline of you having passive pain, like, Christ, that's about the worst scenario you could be.
Right, and so we do very well with but the second, by the way, the pain started, we shift toward more, I'm guessing on the S side, that's why I say weird, but we shift more toward the parasympathetic side of things. So you will achieve the arch by being constantly somewhat under stress. So your baseline is not their baseline. So now we established a baseline, but it's
almost a starting point. It's a
starting point, but that doesn't mean that's yours. Maybe it's an L starting point, but an S starting point is way more toward action.
Yeah.
And so their baseline is actually the baseline of an L person would be the depression of an S person. Mm-hmm. So that would explain why the S allele has a greater propensity for depression, is because an L baseline is a S depression.
Yeah.
Because you're not supposed to be at a baseline. You're supposed to be continuously in somewhat pain.
Yeah.
Or stress or whatever.
It's called just a state of action, kind of.
State of action, right. But remember the conversation about lactate.
Yeah.
Right. There's two states for the body always. You have rest and you have action. Action is lactate. Lactate is a favorite fuel for the brain. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to use your brain a lot, right, that means you're to be in a constant state of action. Maybe that's what the S allele is.
Interesting.
So that means we would have completely different baseline in that sense. Yeah. That means like a person like me has to be. So why am I happy now? Because I'm fucking constantly thinking, doing this continuously. I realized then what killed me before in my youth and everything is I wasn't doing shit. So I've done sports at a national level since I'm 9 years old, but I needed to do more, like continuously, more in school, more.
Yeah. Plus, and for someone like you, if you're just given the things like, all right, do this, and then you'll have this average list of things. If one of those things doesn't interest you, it's out. Yep. So then time you're spending doing that is fucking excruciating. I mean, for you, it needs to be more. It needs to be interesting. It needs to be stimulating. I need action.
But that's the key. I think the key is stimulation.
Yeah.
What that tells me is stimulation. That's what the balloon is. Remember, because a lot of the stuff has been done also at a subconscious pain level. So to me, it's just stimulation.
So it's almost really like on the two sides of this, that you have one that's going to simply be to the most oversimplification.
Yeah.
Genetically just more content.
Yes.
If you will.
At a baseline.
Content with, I would say, a little less activity than what the other side would be.
Extroverted people. Extroverts, all like this, like super happy generally and everything. Yeah, but at what we call a baseline, which I believe is not an S baseline, but regardless, we're going to establish a baseline. So let's do that. Let's oversimplify. Okay. We're going to establish a baseline at a 0, right? Now, this is a completely, that baseline, we're going to establish it from the outside. So it's in a vacuum.
Okay.
I don't think that's the way it works, but let's establish a baseline at 0. At 0, The LLL person, right, will be an extrovert person, happier.
Okay.
Right. At that baseline, you'll see people, the S people with less serotonin, more irritable, more, because they have a higher sympathetic tone. So the L person will have a higher parasympathetic tone that's been linked to, happy people, if you want, right? Mm-hmm. The S people will have a lower serotonin, lower parasympathetic tone. They'll see, that's why it's called the grouchy stuff and everything. They're not where they need to be.
So for that type, for the S type, does it mean simply that you just need to do more?
Exactly.
And then, so for you
need to do shit.
For you to be, let's just pretend that happiness is this fucking thing, where it's just, you fucking turn the light and happiness is on.
Yeah.
It's not, but let's just say, for you to be as happy as someone on the other side, you may simply have to do more. It's a requirement for you. Your happiness cup isn't going to be full until you've accomplished a certain amount.
So imagine a graph, right? You have a graph like this, right? Mm-hmm. Graph is rest toward action, right? And then you have parasympathetic toward sympathetic, right? At rest, the S people is in sympathetic. With action, it goes toward parasympathetic, whereas the LLL starts in rest parasympathetic and goes to sympathetic action. Yeah. And so where you are is in the middle, where Mushin is, where everything is, flow and fight and everything. Yeah. LLL, it's basically close to that. It needs a little bit of stress to get there, but us, we need to get a little bit of stress as well, but from the other side, from the action side. So that means that in order to be happy, you're going to have to stress yourself.
Yeah.
But stress in the good way. In a action mode, you're going to have to, my guess is lactate has a part to do with this as well.
Well, and you've talked for a long time now, years, about how, for probably 2 years fully, about the concept of anxiety being kind of used, being as a driver.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is it. So we look at anxiety as bad, but maybe you're just naturally going to be in a more anxious state until you've taken those steps. And now we can really see that there's a difference between person A's need for action and person B's.
Right. And what I find interesting is, to me, if we look at it from a functional segregation perspective, this is a little bit like lactate isn't there, therefore it's, or it's built up, therefore it's a waste product, which it wasn't the case at all because there was no integration of the data. Yeah. I think it's the same way. They see it as a baseline, people are more irritable, this. There's the problem. Whereas I believe from an integration perspective that this is the body going like, this is not where you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. This is, their baseline is your depression.
Yeah.
So you need to do more, and in the sense of better. Never more, better, but you get the idea.
I think for people that have anxiety and depression too, they very often get stuck into this, it's not comparison in like a keeping up with the Joneses way, like they have nicer things, but the theme I always kind of hear is that it'll be like, why are they so fucking happy? That becomes the thing.
Exactly.
And what happens is someone who is maybe doing less or has accomplished less or has less or whatever the version is that you think you wouldn't be happy if you were in that position. Why are they? Because you are not them.
You are not them.
And something
there seems to be a genetic marker for that.
And how do we separate the like this being like you are assigned here, you are assigned here.
Okay, so we can actually test.
How do we? But I also want to know, how do I get past? How do I make sure that someone still has fucking responsibility for themselves going forward?
Right, but so if you know that, so let's say you're on the S side, right? Yeah. By the way, that means if there's too much greater stress, it's going to take you straight to freeze, right? Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be a space within which you have to exist, right? So your responsibility toward yourself is you making yourself be in that space.
Okay.
If you do baseline, you're going to be irritable, just plain anxious. If you do too much, you're going to be in freeze.
Okay.
But there's a space in which your body is where it should be, like that top of the arch kind of stuff. Your responsibility, if I'm right about this, would be to understand your genetic physiological need.
Yeah, understand that there's going to be days where what you're going to maybe be used to doing is not going to be enough, and that there's going to be
so sometimes it's going to be too much, but the point is too much, you have to understanding yourself as to basically, for example, if you're on SLL, the reason you're anxious is because you're lazy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But again, that doesn't mean do full blast, because I'll put you into depression. That's a problem too, is that there's a space at which you're at your best. Your responsibility is to get your ass off the couch and be in that space. That means physically, that means mentally, that means passion in life and all that stuff. But your passion in life, that means those people have to pursue. You won't be happy unless you're pursuing something. Mm-hmm. That certainly was my life.
Where is the and I think that's simple to be start, go, move, but you need to do more, you get whatever, right? That's where do we know where the line is where you go too far into freeze with that?
Right.
What is
that
line?
Right. So the key is the greater the stress, the more you go toward parasympathetic. So you're gonna go from flow, which even tonic freeze is like the ventral vagus nerve, but eventually you fall into the dorsal vagus nerve. You're gonna have to understand at that moment. So for example, the people on the S part are people that cannot tolerate pain. So you'll see that if you're in a passive pain, so you do holds, isometric hold, you just, there's a second you fucking give up and you go, what the fuck? Yeah, you can't take that stress.
Yeah.
Right, so now let's say you know that. And so you're going to keep pushing that barrier, but not being necessarily mad at yourself for not being able to go there. It's like, but there's a barrier you need to push. So that means like I'm going to do holds and I know at 35, 40 seconds, this is where it gets the hardest. All right, let me see if I can teeter with that. If I go too far into that kind of training, I'll actually crash myself.
Yeah.
Right, but that doesn't mean, so I want to get close to that line, but never crashing myself. So I can have enough weight for do holds of 30 seconds, but not go into a minute, because a minute I keep failing, almost regardless of the weight. So that means I have to do holds for as heavy as I can for 30 seconds because I'm playing with that line, but without going past the line. So the entire training system we could have on that. By the way, on that subject, if when the stress starts, action starts, I go toward parasympathetic. Torque chain, what does that mean?
It's going to be an internal torque.
Exactly. So that means that whenever I'm in action and the pain starts, I need to go toward internal torque. People with the LRL, when they start moving, they're going to go toward external torque. So that there's your training for you. So that means that so let me take myself as an example. I haven't done the testing yet, but most likely I'm an SRL. It's fairly obvious on everything. If I go into powerlifting, when the weight gets heavy, the stress is great. What am I going to do? I'm going to go internal torque first. You can see that on my squat, where I was fucking good morning the fuck out of my squat.
The old standby. You know you can do it. Get it in.
Yeah, but I'm gonna internal torque the shit out of it. So you could see good morning. And what does that mean? That means when it gets too heavy, I shut off. Mm-hmm. So that means I would not be good at powerlifting, which is exactly what you see with me. What would I be good at? Something that involves heavy and internal torque. Carries, which is what I'm great at. Strongman for reps. You know what I mean? So I'll be good at, my choice is strength, so I'll be good at internal torque in strength. Those are carries. Those that are like more like that 8 to 10 rep. You know what I mean? Whereas powerlifting is something that is going to stress me the fuck out and actually depress me, which is I can't do powerlifting very well. What are you going to see Richard? You're going to see Richard needing short-term challenges constantly, and he's going to do very well at powerlifting because he's more toward the LLL, I'm guessing, because we haven't done the testing for him either. That takes him toward that not long-term goal, but short-term goal, more toward external torque when he gets stressed out, happy outside of training, very much into fight during the training. So do you see exactly Richard? Well, me, you're going to see the opposite, kind of more stress during the day if I don't do anything, but become very calm, almost emotionally detached when I train hard, burn the questions. Because I can detach myself from it and go into a full executive network, but actually kind of sell in because I never detach myself, from that, and just detaching the emotions from the experience. And I'm very good at that. By the way, when it comes to fighting, that's what you want. Because fighting, you don't want to be into full fight. You want to go there, emotionally detached, seeing everything with that tonic freeze whenever I'm getting, and then, so you could see that the SRL will make for the best fighters. Cool under pressure. Right. Whereas the other one will just go, but then they will be much better at powerlifting, shit like that.
And some other ones that might catch a slip in once or twice, but they're going to lose 8 times out of 10.
Right. Exactly. Because they go like this. So you could see the difference in fighters as well. The guys that just fucking move forward like crazy. So you could see an entire way of mapping your training, who you are, your life and your training based on that mapping.
And there was a gender component to this though, right?
Okay, so that's the best part.
It very interesting.
There's the best part. So we're talking about production of serotonin, right? SRL produce less serotonin. L allele produce more. So their thing was S allele are more anxious people. They gravitate toward negative emotion at a baseline. L allele gravitate toward more extrovert, higher happiness at the baseline, at that baseline we establish. Right. That's for men. Women are opposite. Women with the L allele.
So everything you just described, from the S to the
might
L,
be opposite
for women.
Yeah.
Flip it.
But I don't know about the pain tolerance. So the pain tolerance. So
the pain tolerance itself may be
still the same
only.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but so some of it is gender only, but not all of it. So the pain tolerance is still high. But what is interesting is women with the L allele are more anxious, more toward negative stuff.
Yeah.
But
so what that leads me to believe is we don't know anything about serotonin.
That means we don't know fuck all about it. Yeah. You know, okay, so serotonin is a messenger, basically. Mm-hmm. It allows the brain to have a better connection with the monitoring of the viscera, which is very important.
And it seems like it really is a measuring device too.
By the way, even what I say is not entirely true, because people with S allele have been shown to have greater viscera monitoring. See, it says greater engagement of visceral afferent processing network. See?
Remember how you did a really good job putting this in the right spot and I lost it?
You know what I mean? So it's right there. Okay. You know what I mean? So that means that people with the S allele, the men with the S allele, have a greater monitoring of the viscera. Remember, which has a lot to do with the sense of self.
Yeah.
So that's very important. So I mean that rabbit hole keeps going. There you go. Keeps going again and again and again, right? So. But it seems that women with the L allele are the ones that are more at a baseline of anxiety than like the men at the S allele. So now you have a component of S allele can tolerate less pain. So that means that the L allele women are with higher anxiety but can tolerate more pain, and then would go toward. So the question is, L allele, do they have a higher, lower sympathetic tone? Right, because then you could start to look at CrossFit.
Can they go further? Should they go harder? Can they,
right, yeah. Because look at Valerie Voborl.
Do they have to also?
Do they have to? So Valerie Voborl, right, was super stressed person.
Yeah.
Right, consciously anxious, so she would be the LLL. But the second she would start to move, she get into the flow, and she was the best pacer you've ever seen. So more toward the flow side. And what did she suck at? Jumping stuff. She sucked at being in external torque. Yeah. So that would mean that she would be an L allele, but still with the same component as an S allele. But
SLL if it was.
But she would have more serotonin too.
Yeah.
Because she's an L allele, right? So imagine. Okay. So, but my point with all this is, we don't fucking know. So, by the way, talking into antidepressants and everything, that means that men and women do not produce a reaction based on serotonin are not the same at all.
Not at all.
So that means
and not only that, 50% of the men will respond differently than the other half too.
On top of it. So like imagine how much of a cluster this is. By the way, those things are called, if you Google it, it's called pain clusters. Pain clusters, so PC1 versus PC2, pain cluster 1 versus pain cluster 2. Again, I think they're fucking up on the anxiety because of the baseline. But anyway, but that works for men. For women, it seems to be the opposite stuff. So that means that women that produce naturally more serotonin are more on the anxious and negative side. Men that produce less serotonin are more on the anxious and negative side. So that means we don't do fuck all now, do we?
We just throw more serotonin at both of them
via
SSRIs.
Right.
And then we just
So that might work at 1 out of 4. Yeah. By the way, 80% of people that take antidepressant report feeling exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right. So who the fuck knows if that...
Also, you're statistically the same risk of suicide if you're on them versus not. You know that?
Yeah. Okay, so by the way, interestingly with that, Japan, right, so let's go back to culture, because it seems that serotonin and culture have actually a major component. So S allele in Japan, there's way more. We're talking like 3-4 times more S than L, opposite of Western world. S allele in Japan are still more anxious than L alleles. But this is a culture that has far more S allele than L allele. And this is a culture that has 10 times less anxiety than the Western culture. The Western culture is more L allele, right? So, but still more anxious than the Japanese one. By the way, the S allele seems to be, so the L allele would be individualistic, where the S allele would be more communal based, whatever you want to call it.
I'd use the term conformist, but whatever.
Did you just call me a conformist?
No, of course not. But my thing is, so you talk about the L's in the way that we would describe, say Richard, right? As just extrovert. He's a really good thing for that. We haven't done the testing.
We haven't done the test,
but it's a good example to just throw an overarching.
99%.
But but you mentioned that there is a much higher prevalence of that in Western culture, correct? And yet we still have much higher rates of anxiety and stuff as well. Does that mean that the baseline has us set up to be content with less action, if you will, and yet we are still societally doing so much less even?
Right.
To where we're creating problems for them and for the people who have a further gap.
That seems to be. So that's the Industrial Revolution, right? Where maybe in that sense, there's the way so for example, like the industrious stuff, it's more communal based and everything would be more the S allele. So there's an entire component there between the S and the L that is very, very interesting. But for example, what do I mean by that? If you look at the L allele, right? So you have, so they have lower cortisol. So for example, that goes a bit too far, but there's a negative influence of the hippocampus on the amygdala. But so amygdala is the center for emotions, but fear mostly. So there's an entire thing with fear as well, based on S versus L. What is very interesting is on the L allele, right? You have a greater activity of the right anterior insula. Right anterior insula is where the active eye exists. So whenever they're in pain, their active eye takes over. Very interestingly speaking, the people on the S, right? They have a greater influence on the what is called the MPFC, that's the medial prefrontal cortex. What's interesting about that is that on the left side, the ventral medial prefrontal cortex is the seat of the me.
Okay.
So I need...
So there's a bias to each...
Yes, there is. So there's a bias between the me, the passive eye, and the active eye based on the S versus L allele, also relating to culture, obviously, also relating to gender. So we don't know fuck all. I mean, we do.
But that's what we know is we don't really...
So this is why we need functional integration.
Yeah.
Because it's like that whole serotonin for all, like we should have a t-shirt that says serotonin for all, basically, it's not... Because, for example, quick example, they say people with low serotonin have irritability, maybe problem with violence and stuff like that, where it's been proven that there's mice called the TG8 mice that have their brain is flushed with serotonin because they're lacking a specific gene that establishes, can't remember what it is, that breaks down serotonin.
Correct.
And so they are the most aggressive mice we've ever produced. There's a family here in Holland that was famous for that. They had the same problem where their brain
gene was
slightly off, so which means they were not breaking down serotonin. So their brain was just full of serotonin, and they were a family of psychopaths.
And it was generations of murders, violence,
arsonists,
everything.
Psychopath, generations of psychopaths.
And bordering on, and I did a lot of look into that subject for stuff we get into later, but in that case specifically, the Dutch, bordering on not just having violent tendencies, but true hallucinogenic mental illness, literally seeing things that aren't there and responding violently. Those things are
schizophrenia.
It is absolutely insane.
Yeah, right. That family was famous. By the way, generations of that.
Yeah.
Right. So they had too much serotonin.
Yeah.
So they looked at the S versus L, saying, see, lower serotonin equals irritability. I'm like, no, they have a higher sympathetic tone, but that's the conclusion based on functional segregation. If you look at functional integration, you could come up with a very different conclusion.
Yeah, and it's different relative to their baseline, and that's...
Right, but again, the goal of the body is to get to a different baseline than for the SRL. But again, that means that serotonin as a molecule of happiness, fuck no.
Plus, like you mentioned, as it is essentially a messenger of a lot of things.
It's a messenger, yes. Yeah, by the way, of so many things too.
Yeah, but I don't even know where I want to get into all of this at this point, but it is interesting to me because everything that we see with serotonin is very cloudy. It either is this overarching thing, kind of like a lot of these studies were, this and this and this and this, and then they never really go in and it's just like, serotonin kind of leans this way, yet we're taking very, very, very specific serotoninogenic actions on these fucking studies, which is insane to me.
Yeah, but so people are actually now starting to monetize this because they're all assuming that boosting serotonin is the key.
Yeah.
And so welcome to functional segregation. I'm like, well, whatever I do to boost serotonin, therefore is good. That's an objective-based mentality for you. So I'm going to have, we know, for example, that to boost serotonin production, if you have tryptophan and then a spike in insulin, you'll get more tryptophan toward the RAF nuclei, which will produce the higher brain serotonin. So let's do that.
Yeah.
So how do I get a spike of insulin and tryptophan? Well, carbs. So if I get carbs in, then I get higher serotonin, everything is cool. Right, so let's look at that from S versus LRM. So if I'm an S allele, I have a higher sympathetic tone. I take carbs, I have the spike of insulin. That's true, I got higher serotonin. Yes, but that also means I've basically went up on my sympathetic natural drive. Right, so instead of going toward movement in parasympathetic,
taking action and then getting regulated as you should.
Right, and I'm taking action toward more sympathetic. Yeah. So that's basically, and then when I reach too high of a sympathetic, what happened? Blah! I fall straight into a major freeze mode. So,
and with carbs and things like that, we talked about this before, where that is like we're just treating the wrong thing anyways, right? Like,
right. It's not.
So we get into here. It's
exactly.
Like you need to take action. You don't need to have carbs and then take action. You need to take action because by taking this through a external substance, all you're doing is just jacking up your system even further the way it's already predisposed towards.
Exactly. So the wrong way, right? Yeah. Again, you're not understanding what you're designed to be. You're designed to be someone who fucking goes. Yeah. So if you're SRL, you probably would say need a lot less carbs because you don't want to go toward the sympathetic. You're trying to go toward sympathetic. Now that does not mean that you have to do Disney December all day.
No.
Because remember, you can still have the same goal. My goal is still strength. That hasn't changed. But I can do that through going toward like internal torque, so more toward like strongman training, for example. That would fit better for me. But that also means that I have to be careful with carbs, because otherwise it drives me toward a sympathetic, if I'm an SLR, it drives me toward a sympathetic reaction that eventually crashes me, which is exactly what I saw with sugar and caffeine. What did I say? I can't have either. Eventually it gets me super negative. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the SLR with a baseline of seeing things more negative, right? If I go higher on the sympathetic, obviously I'm going to higher toward anxiety and negative feelings, which is exactly what caffeine and sugar give me.
And with this, the thing is, we talked about with the two types, and then the genders flipping the fucking results.
That's another problem as well. Too. And so now there's a clusterfuck for you.
So then what happens is, if you're turning to carbs or you're turning to antidepressant medications, anything like that, for the solution.
Sorry, both?
Yeah, the solution is like literally has a good chance of making the problem far, far, far worse.
So, well, basically, it might be that only 1 out of 4 we get the result. So if we boost serotonin and boost carbs, chances are 1 out of 4 would do well. Right, that's not a good percentage now, is it?
No.
So maybe that's why you see such a problem with antidepressants, where it seems to work for 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4, more or less. But maybe we don't understand how all that fucking shit works. So at the end, you know what works is you need to know yourself. So would the genetic mapping works? I think eventually we're gonna get to that. So when I'm looking at this is like, I'm gonna do a test, I'm gonna put Richard on it. But if I'm right with all this, we could have a genetic mapping done, which would allow me to see better what kind of life you need to live and what kind of training you need to do to maximize your state.
Yeah.
That I believe we could do. So that's why I was like, from a practical perspective, I think this is a gold mine, because with the right information, I believe we could design a better training plan for you, but not based on the serotonin, based on what your body is, where your body is trying to get you. Yeah. What is your space, right? And it's not serotonin, it's not that. It's like, I believe, so for me, what I'm understanding out of this is we all have different baselines. Baseline as least not as rest, as what space do you need to occupy to be at your best, right? And I believe the S and the L have different baseline in that sense. So you have the baseline 0 and you have that space where you're going to be at your best. And they are not the same.
Yeah. And there's got to be a lot of people training, not knowing, just knowing a particular training method. If you don't understand all of this, you're trying to cope with how you feel, anxiety.
Right.
Also still trying to train, still trying to make progress, in which case you are trying to work hard, put a lot of effort in
nutrition, not sleeping well.
Yeah, and you could be running the fucking wrong opposite direction if you don't understand these things.
And by the way, what if, so talking about people on the SRL, the PC1, the pain clusters number 1, they don't sleep as well. Right, so maybe it's also because you're supposed to see that and fix it.
Yeah, and those
you're
are
supposed
people
to
that
take the
have
actions.
Inherently, we're going to be sitting with higher levels of serotonin. Is that correct?
Right. No, lower level. So more irritable people.
Okay.
Right, and so less sleep will make it worse.
Yeah.
So that's the SRL.
Less overall sleep.
Less,
as in time. Okay,
exactly.
okay, yeah, but that's right. So because there's a thing in the other thing I've been working on is that there is a thing out there called REM sleep disorder.
Yeah.
Which when serotonin builds up, it's essentially, you're out, but you're not out.
Yeah.
As in, your brain will go to sleep and your body will you'll be walking around and things like that. And so there's a lot of that out there where essentially you can get, and that's an extreme end where it's almost sleepwalking, but there is that disorder. It fills a lot of space for people where they're laying there asleep, not moving, but the body's not necessarily paralyzed. The body is then not really hardly recovering at all either. And then that just ends. You spent your time in bed, you get up in the morning and you got dog shit sleep and you don't know why, but you were out. And so all you know is that you just feel shitty and you think you got sleep, so you don't blame it on the sleep.
What is REM sleep disorder is when you have REM sleep, your body shuts off in order for you not to act on the dreams so that your mind can heal from the experience and everything. The REM sleep disorder is that shut off is not done well.
So your body essentially
starts to act on the stuff. Yeah.
And so from a basic level, your body's just not getting the recovered time that it gets. So it starts this snowball. And if you're treating it with serotonin, if you're chasing serotonin for this, you're only going to make it worse. So
right. So there's an entire thing there that is massive. But again, for me, the people with SRL that have worse sleep, whatever that means, right? That means what? That means that the point is that you're supposed to get to good sleep. Yes. So you're supposed to understand that you have to move more during the day, that you have to do more at night, that again, you have to do better.
Yeah, we can't just throw a dart at sleep. It's not it.
Then it won't work. No. So that means people with higher serotonin will sleep better without having to do as much as you do. But that's the point, because that's not your space. Yeah. Your space is doing a lot. So when I have great days, when I study this for 3 hours, I go train in the morning, I do all that, I sleep just fine.
Yeah.
I don't abuse carbs. I don't take sugar. I don't take caffeine. I train in the morning, do all my work, come back, go to the coffee shop, do all that stuff. Then I go socialize. I have meat, I have protein and everything. Then I sleep like a baby. Maybe that's my space. And people will be like, yeah, but he doesn't have to do as much to get to the same place. I'm like, exactly. Yeah. But look how much shit I do.
Yeah.
Like, look how much more learning I've done since off the sugar and the caffeine. Look how much more I'm accomplishing. Look how many more actions I'm taking. So, who is in the unfair situation? Me or them?
Right. Yeah.
Because I'm being pushed by my own being into doing more, into accomplishing more, into being more successful, into being training harder. So who is it unfair to? Like, most people look at it the wrong way. I think the biggest issue we see is that people just don't want to do work.
And like in your case, it's that whatever it is in you that is leaning that way, it's just going to require a higher standard of you.
Exactly. Higher ambition about myself. And so I'll take full blame on this on myself, especially like 20 to 40, where I was fucking lazy. I had no ambition for myself. If I look back, my biggest problem, I think, I've said that a lot to people closer to me, where my problem in life is not wanting. I can do pretty much what I put my mind to. I don't want enough. So my standard for myself was not high enough. I did not have enough ambition in all parts of my life. But maybe because that's who I'm supposed to be, is that person that has such a high, that should have such a high ambition, should have such a high standard for me, that I have to constantly chase it. Yeah. And that's who I'm supposed to be. That's my space. My space is chasing. And people that know me know that. Like I need to chase. If I don't, I told my mother that when she would leave me at home. If I get bored, you're in trouble. Don't let me get bored. But that's been my life. Is don't let me get bored. Yeah. Like I'll go chase. Like don't let me get bored. That's always been like girlfriend. You guys know this. Don't let me get bored. Yeah. But maybe that's who I am. Right? Someone who has to chase constantly, and that's really the feeling. Like I have to. That's why all that shit. I people are like you're going so fast. I was like that speed is not. That train is not slowing down.
No, I know.
It's kind of speeding up.
It's killing me here.
Yeah, but maybe that's who I am, because that's my profile.
Yeah.
My space is chasing.
Yeah.
Right. So, but once you know that, then do that.
Well, for me, and I can tell too, though, that like when you're stuck not doing those things.
Yeah. I'm not happy.
You are fucking. You're like you just know. I just need to get to like. And for you, it's not that you need to get to just doing something. You feel the pull, and I can tell from a distance. You feel the pull where you need to get to progress.
Yeah.
It can't just. It's not just doing something for something's sake.
That's not
sake. It's like I need to be moving this needle forward, or I'm gonna have a fucking problem with what I did today.
Yeah.
And not even something that you're gonna sit down and define. Well, you're just gonna be fuck. This day just didn't. It wasn't what it could have been, and that's always the more and more.
And you can see how stressed I get.
Yeah.
Like it just gets to me mentally.
Yeah.
Like I don't like it.
Yeah.
The day has to. I have to get better.
But I'll be goddamn if you don't move pretty fucking fast.
Right. But so imagine again, but there's a simple test for genetic mapping we can do, the S versus the L mapping. So we're gonna put everybody on that. But I can design a training system based on that. So now that I'm gonna do that for me first. But everything that I read on this is like I know that. Because that's what I'm good at. I see the carries, I see the I remember the cyclical work? Well, so they would be that, right? That means I have to do in cyclical work, which is why when I want to take away soreness, I do cyclical work, all soreness goes away. I push toward a parasympathetic tone. I mean, so I have a bad deep sleep, I have a fairly low HRV, right? Because I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's an entire thing, and then the whole process of the emotional networks being shut off during exercise. I'm like, that tells me how I need to train. I need to go toward pain and being able to push that, but like in a very specific space where I shut off the stuff, but I don't go into freeze.
Yeah. So we're gonna. You don't know the specifics on this genetic testing yet.
There's a few companies that do it. I'll give you the links.
Yeah.
The one I've seen was like $150.
Yeah.
For the testing.
And most likely we'll get it and play with it. We'll kind of talk through that process as we go too.
Right, because this is very, very new. But I'm starting to think nutrition. I'm starting to think training. I'm starting to think baseline, where you should be almost like in life kind of thing. So this would give me a tremendous leg up front on anxiety and depression, for example, that kind of stuff. This, from a practical perspective on anxiety and tolerance, will be monstrous. So I know where the conversation is going, because I know there's a guy out there doing something like that, but that's not true. Like whatever you see out there that is based on the pain clusters is based on serotonin. Only.
On its own, yeah.
On its own. Yeah. And that's functional segregation.
And you think
that is not how this works.
And much of it is very, what's the word? Like objective. Or subjective. Subjective.
It's more a personality trait than it is a true genetic mapping. And my problem too is, from what I saw, it doesn't reflect the men and women.
The opposite.
Opposite stuff. Yeah. Right. So, but again, you can't base any of that shit on serotonin. Serotonin is a messenger. It's there something to facilitate certain things.
Plus, if I do have a list of some personality types and I go and ask people, you know how people are, they're going to pick very often something like that. It's like
sounds better.
I used to have this thing with custom. I used to get new technicians would come in. A client would say, "What happened at this time?" And they said this, but it doesn't make any sense. And I said, "Yeah, because your customer's fucking lying to you, not on purpose, because they don't fucking know.
Right?
They don't know. It's okay.
Right. There's that too.
They
By the way,
don't know.
They might pick the one they think they would like to be, and then sometimes they're just plain mistaken about. Yeah.
I might think that I'm assertive and intelligent, and half the population might think that I'm just a dick. Right?
Besides, when someone,
you know what I'm saying?
Someone says you're an asshole, you go, "No, I'm not." That's not up to you.
No.
That's for other people to decide.
His experience was valid, I guess.
Right. No, but the point is that's not up to you to decide. That's everybody else that decides that one. You don't get to say I'm not an asshole. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, you can try your best to not be one, but in the end, it's their call, not yours.
But it's their call, not yours, right? So there's a lot of problem with that. So personality based training, this is just monetizing. And so whenever you hear people saying monetizing serotonin, run.
Yeah.
We don't know that well. We don't know that well. Now, is there some use from, for example, some antidepressants? Yes, from a small percentage of the population, it has worked. But it has worked for a short-term duration. I can give you just as many people, probably 3 times as many, who are 5-10 years later are still on the shit.
Yeah, don't get me started. We'll fight that fight later.
We'll have that podcast because it's starting to. So the monetization of serotonin is killing me.
Yeah.
Like, so whenever you see that, run, because this is not serotonin. This is a genetic mapping to that 5-HT-LPR testing is just to give an indication, right? But gender, culture, everything else has to go into play in order for us to, so it'll be a tool toward understanding what your baseline is. What I see out of that testing is if your baseline is more parasympathetic or sympathetic. That seems to be what that testing can tell you. Yeah. That your parasympathetic tone is naturally higher or your sympathetic tone is naturally higher based on that. Now that gives us something we can work with. Yeah. But that's it. We're going back to parasympathetic versus sympathetic. It is not about serotonin. Knowing if you're more toward the parasympathetic, more toward sympathetic, and that crisscross, right? When action is taking place. Now that's a tremendous help I can use toward nutrition, toward training, toward all that stuff. That is actionable. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that.
Well, we'll be talking about this going forward. I think. I'm going to guess as soon as we do testing, as soon as we start playing with it, as soon as we'll see. When we find out about the testing, we'll let you guys know for sure. So we can point you where to go.
By the way, I have to link all this to the sense of self as well, because there's a relationship there.
And when Julien's like, we're going to film probably still like every other day here. And I'm like, okay. But then what's going to happen is we're going to get this huge backlog and I'm just going to be releasing 2 podcasts a week sooner.
There you go.
Only because I can't fucking like sit on all this information.
Exactly. So we're going to do interoception next so I can explain where all this comes from because I believe it's important. People have been messaging Richard to see if we can stay toward one topic and I was like, no. But we're going to... What do you mean?
I will tell you this. If you've learned anything from what we've done, it's that what Julien will do is throw random chaos out and something will hit and just and then something random chaos and that is how I work. That's how I live.
Something funny. So read that one. This is the S allele. Read that part here. Third one.
Better with more variable erratic conditions. That right here, dude.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's about genetic. It's literally cartography right there. That's what it says.
Now,
Isn't that funny?
When I look at myself in this, I think that those types of things I fall into there. When I do see like the training and the under stress things, I see some conflicted. So I'm very interested actually in seeing the testing.
Let's do the testing. Yeah. So what we'll do, for the podcast, we'll do a lot of interoception so I can explain the sense of self, I versus me. So I can explain what is it so important, the visceral monitoring. The monitoring of visceral input is so important. All that stuff needs to be explained. Yeah. And as we do this, as we go, we'll all do the testing. And then we'll start to test to see, we'll do it on Megan too. And we'll start to do that to see how we can adapt all that. Yeah. That parasympathetic versus sympathetic tone to me will be the key.
Yeah, awesome.
And it's not fucking serotonin. Fuck. Like, do you understand how many people we're fucking up? We're going to have the whole thing about antidepressants again. Yeah. And we'll go into the conspiracy, the real numbers.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, I'm going to promise you guys, here's what I always say with conspiracy stuff. Is that I am well versed in almost every conspiracy that's out there. I know so many things about so many of my deep dives. I never, ever, ever try to get to why.
Yeah.
Because you try to connect motives and you have to assume too many things, and that's why these people are crazy.
Yes, exactly.
Like if
if
you want to say like, that video footage didn't make any sense to me, and it's the data and all that stuff, that means a question that could be answered. That's like a point against a thing. But by saying that video footage is like that because satanic pedophiles from another dimension are running the world, then you're like, but that video is real. Right. Now I gotta
you
fucking
fucked
asshole.
It up completely. Exactly.
So anyway, we've been going kind of deep into the documentation of it and some very interesting stuff. So we will have a conspiracy episode for you somewhere. We've managed to not touch on the coronavirus. As I say with all these things, wait 10 years and then we can talk about it like we know something.
10 years, exactly.
The way things are with information nowadays.
No, plus we'll get kicked off YouTube.
Yes.
You know that there was a video, I can't remember, where the guy says, please don't say coronavirus, we'll get demonetized.
We're going to find out.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to lose.
Coronavirus.
I didn't say it.
Do you know that 38% of Americans will not drink a Corona beer because it's Corona in the bottle?
Yes. And my only saving, the only thing that makes me feel a little better is that now that is people who are somewhere answering questionnaires that people are giving them. So I'm hoping that 38% of the people who answer questions that people ask them randomly like that are the types that would do that. And then I definitely believe that. But if you come asking me a question like that, I'm skipping past it. You know what I mean? Nobody asks me those questions.
Remember SARS?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was only in China, right?
Yeah.
At the time, I was training the owner of the second largest Chinese franchise restaurant in the US. Right? And he told me that his business dropped by 50%. Because during SARS, that only happened in China, people in the US would not eat in Chinese restaurants.
Yeah. You can't win.
They're so fucking stupid.
Now, I will say one quick update. Still sleeping on the floor. Y'all check in on that. Let us know how that's going. Megan is still fully in. I've heard from lots of people since we announced it. Varying things like, I have to tell you this one. So John and his wife. Yeah. John, he heard about it on the podcast because I sent it to him a day early because we had to. Julien announced all that stuff we had to sell right away. All those things
exactly.
That then had to get built. Yeah. So I get the audio to John so he can get some of the copy right from Julien's words instead of me saying it twice. And then I'm talking to John the next day about. He's like, I tried sleeping on the floor, and then so the second night this is John's second night on the floor. He's taking the stuff, he's setting it down, and his wife is there. And he's like, I shouldn't be telling. I'm telling this. Fuck it. And apparently what happened was she didn't notice that he slept on the floor that first night at all. And he had sent her some messages like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this article. That she was busy and she just said, I'll check them out later. So as far as she's concerned, there was no thing about sleeping on the floor at all. And just before bedtime, John's just throwing pillows on the floor and to go sleep on the floor. It's like, what the fuck is your problem? That's probably not how her reaction was.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can imagine just coming in thinking everything's normal.
Are we
throwing your shit on the floor and be like, what?
Yeah, are we fighting? What happened? Now, what I want to know is if people that are morning persons need to sleep with knee sleeves on.
I know this for sure. I've heard words like pry my bed from my cold dead fingers.
Yes.
Like there's no fucking way.
Hashtag.
Like listen, all that stuff, the reason you think you need it's all indoctrination. Conspiracy time.
Yeah, and your $1,000 bed.
Exactly.
Yeah, you should not.
I will tell you this, I had no fucking money when Megan and when Lincoln was a baby, and I still was spending like $1,000 on a fucking bed.
Yeah. And
I think I spent $250 a month on that fucking house to live.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and exactly.
But that's got us all wrapped up for today. We're gonna find everything else at strongfit.com, strongfitequipment.com, or .eu. We have StrongFit1 on Instagram, Tyler F. and So on Instagram, Rare Barracuda on Instagram. The functional integration training template is going to be available in the little thing below the thing there in the description.
Okay, there we go.
Also,
need to make a post on the Facebook community.
Yes, yep. I'll do that too. Everything should be live by the time you're hearing this. So then what else did we have? We have Julien's one-to-one coaching. We'll also have links. Those will be in the link tree on Instagram, and everything is always below in the descriptions if you're watching or listening. Support the podcast at podcast.strongfit.com. Then we keep doing more things. This read just gets longer and longer and longer and longer. But
we're gonna need that. Like ad
roll footage.
Yeah. When you just record it one time, and
here's what happened. I've done that before. I actually did that in the beginning with Massonomics, and yet you still kind of have to read it before you do it because you have new thing. You know what I mean? We got the new shirt. So it's always just better to do it. If you're still listening, it just means you like us this much.
Yes.
So
thanks
a lot. We'll see y'all next week.